Hello everyone. Tonight we're going to start with the fiery life and legacy of Boudica, the Iceni warrior queen whose ferocity and bravery rocked the Roman Empire to its foundation. Her revolt was a pivotal moment of resistance in ancient Britain. It was audacious, violent, and unforgettable. Her life was a storm wrapped in fire and iron, from being proclaimed queen to leading tens of thousands into battle. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to the video before you settle in, but only if you truly like what I do here. It's always interesting to see who is joining us from around the globe, so please let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Let's ease into tonight's voyage together by turning down the lights and possibly turning on a fan to provide a gentle background hum. You are not born in a palace with marble floors and golden cradles. Like it's late for something, you are born in a round house with a thatched roof, a packed dirt floor, and smoke curling out of the hole in the ceiling. The wind hums across the moors outside. Your mother hums something older inside. As an Iceni, you were born in the eastern outskirts of Britannia, which the Romans would eventually refer to as a boundary, but which you simply call home. There are only instincts, no maps. When you appreciate the earth, it nourishes you. When you don't, it punishes you. The oaks stand tall, the rivers speak. You are not protected as a child. You are sun-warmed, mud-smeared, and pummeled by the wind. Before you can walk correctly, you must learn to ride. Before learning to embroider, you learn how much a spear weighs, which is fortunate because it appears that your embroidery was defeated. This is encouraged by your parents. Sons must be equally intelligent as daughters. Sharper, perhaps. Sons can inherit even if they are foolish. It must be earned by daughters. You learn stories from the elders, from recollection, not from scrolls. Stories of antler-wielding gods, iron-willed queens, and rivers that sweep cowards away. With your mouth full of honeyed oats and your eyes wide, you listen. The stories aren't all you want to hear. You'd like to be one. Your tribe resides near the land and near rumors. Strange individuals wearing steel sandals and red cloaks are rumored to be landing to the south. Where the earth didn't ask for highways, they construct them. To make room for taxes, they clear sacred woods. However, they are far distant. For the time being, Rome is not on your mind. You consider horses. The conversation around your neck is on your mind. Heavy, bronze, inherited from the women who came before you. You consider your name, Boudica, and what victory means. That makes you smile. It sounds less like a name and more like a prophecy. The Romans will eventually realize it as well, but you're still developing right now. You're still observing the fog coming in, still awaiting the start of the story. You already know two important Iceni life truths by the time you are 10 years old. First, there's always something going on among the Romans. Second, you might be under a blade if you don't learn how to swing one. You are raised around warriors, hardened combatants with wild hair, louder voices, and no sense of indoor volume, rather than polished soldiers with matching uniforms and Roman-style coordinated marching. Armor is optional. Scars are not. Your tutors are not scholars. They are survivors. Your lessons begin at dawn, not with arithmetic, but with a wooden sword and a bruised shin. You learn to block before you learn to breathe through your nose properly. Every meal comes with a side of training, whether it's dagger drills, spear throws, or dodging goats that seem personally offended by your existence. A man who smells like he sleeps in hay and is more raspy than human teaches you how to ride. A one-eyed, shaggy pony with the demeanor of an inebriated badger is your first mount. You bond immediately, but it's not all violence and livestock. You sit by the fire with the elders, listening to them argue about tribal matters with the same intensity one might reserve for life and death decisions. Warning, sometimes they are. You learn how to roll your eyes graciously behind someone's back, when to talk and when to listen. Then there are the local mystics, the druids, who insist on pulling you into ceremonies involving sacred oaks, standing stones, and long-winded poetry that may or may not be about you. They are dressed in robes and riddles. One particularly dramatic elder insists you were chosen by the gods. It sounds a little menacing, but you're not sure which gods or for what. You grow into your name, Boudica, triumph. You will soon be crowned queen by alliance rather than just birthright. You marry Prasutagus, the ruling king of the Iceni, a clever man, a cautious man, and importantly a man who has learned to smile politely at Rome while gritting his teeth. It takes time for Rome to conquer. Instead of swords, it occasionally offers contracts. Your husband experienced that. The Iceni consented to become a vassal kingdom of Rome, following an earlier uprising in 47 CE that was not yet headed by you, a companion. Theoretically, you are still independent. In actuality, you are now supposed to give a nod of approval to Roman buildings, Roman taxes, and Roman authorities who are unable to pronounce local names. Your life changes when you become queen. Now you dwell in a bigger round house, complete with Roman ceramics and the occasional guest in shiny armor who exudes supremacy and olive oil. You never forget the sensation of iron and bone, even though you wear expensive jewelry and fine wool. You throw feasts, you pour wine, you put up with Roman chit-chat, you receive a polished bronze mirror as a present from one governor. You practically give your axe back. You do a good job at the role, though. You learn the rhythms of diplomacy, which is another form of warfare. Prasutagus walks the tightrope while you watch. He maintains harmony and trades with Rome, but he never really trusts the hand he's shaking. You all work together to govern a tribe that hasn't rebelled, but hasn't given up. Still, you give birth to daughters, two shrewd-eyed, powerful girls. They both ride and bite like lightning. You train them to speak with fire. You don't raise them to marry well. They are raised for survival. And your husband grows sick. As slowly as ink in water, the disease spreads. When rulers pass away without a Roman-friendly strategy, Prasutagus is aware of what happens to tribal areas. Thus, he acts in accordance with his judgment. He drafts a will. Along with you and your daughters, he names Rome as a co-heir to the Iceni kingdom. He finds it ingenious, a middle ground, a bridge. However, co-parenting is not practiced in Rome, particularly not with women. You silently bury your husband. His speech is placed on the altar. After that you wait for Rome to come, not for sorrow to end. They will too, with chains, not with condolences. When they arrive, your husband's body is hardly chilly. Roman administrators, clad in pompous masks and useless cloaks, come to your settlement to audit rather than to grieve. They don't bring sympathy. They bring debt collectors, scrolls, and a very petty sense of entitlement. Prasutagus's will naming Rome and his family as heirs? Ignored, conveniently. The empire claims everything. Your throne, land, weapons, livestock, and treasure. To make grief even more offensive, they tell you that the Iceni are now completely under Roman rule. No ceremony, no vote. Just a fake smile and Latin paperwork. You attempt diplomacy. You respond to them by quoting their own laws. They respond to you by quoting steel. Then things get out of hand. Your house is overrun by Roman soldiers. Not with a military force. They are not in need of one. Only enough men to make an impression. They demolish your prestige as if it were scaffolding. They deprive you, defeated you, in public, dragged in the ground. In front of your people was the Iceni queen. What about your daughters? You're afraid to say it out loud. What they went through was inhumane. Rome dismisses this type of trauma as discipline, the type that a mother's heart will always hold. Then you hold them. Silent and trembling, you gaze into their eyes, and something ancient awakens within you, older than Rome. The Romans were never able to comprehend it. Rage with a purpose. The elders of the village advise patience. They fear the vengeance of Rome. They talk about surviving, of holding out, of quiet. You don't yell, not quite yet. However, a new oath is engraved inside of you. The Iceni are observing. Your people are kneeling on the dirt next to you, not with weakness, but in collective anger. This was more than simply a slight. This was a message to every Briton: you'll bow, or we'll shatter you. You also think, if they desired for you to be broken, you ought to have been slain by them. You don't rise for your own dignity. The land itself requires you to rise. It is required by the ancestors. It is required by the oak and iron gods. You succeed because no one will ever be able to take advantage of your daughters. And Rome, far away, is unaware that they have just committed their worst error. It was justice, they said. Put in order, regulation, an essential adjustment. But the sound is what you recall. Your back is being whipped, your people's quiet, the weight of the looks from your daughters. It was something worse than terror, recognizing, since they are aware that this is not an homage, or touchdown, or politics. It has to do with humiliation. You are the Iceni queen, Boudica, taken from your house and thrashed in front of your tribe like a robber, not carried out, no. You would have been a martyr for that. This is more effective. You're still here, broken, clearly ashamed, intended as a cautionary tale, but it's obvious that whoever approved this had never dealt with a furious Briton. The memories of your daughters hurts more than the scars on your back. What was done to them, what can't be undone. They're too young to take revenge. However, you're not. And you start to figure things out when the blood dries. You don't yell, you make up stories, you go to the councils of the tribe. You don't speak much, you pay greater attention, you collect the murmurs of other tribes equally incensed, equally bruised, the Trinovantes, the Catuvalauni, the Dubuni. Rome believes that you are all broken. They're correct, too. However, if dropped from a height high enough, even a fractured rock can shatter a man's skull. You start using metaphors in your speech. Fire, storm, the bear mother who loses her young. You don't call for war. You present retribution as a logical conclusion. You are heard first by the women. The elders came next, then the fighters. You work out covertly. Weapons from the past are reforged. At night, the druids start chanting. The gods are paying attention. So are the Roman spies. But it will be too late by the time they realize what's happening. You use iron clasps to braid your daughter's hair. You hone your spear. You paint your face for battle, not for show. One morning there isn't a queen visible in the river. An executioner is visible. Rome believed that you were being punished. In reality, it provided you with the one item that no kingdom should ever provide to its adversaries. A cause. The injury is still there. It bleeds forward now, though. You're not a speaker. Not initially. You don't have to. Your back has been seen by others. They've seen the faces of your daughter. You only need that campaign poster. However, battle requires impetus, not only discomfort. You ride, then, from one village to another, council fire to campfire. Your presence speaks for itself, tall, fierce, clad with a coat made of wolf fur. In the wind, your red hair is wild. According to some, your eyes shine like coals. That's overstating things. Most likely, however you allowed them to believe it. Fear spreads more quickly than the truth. You talk about freedom, but you don't use lovely metaphors. You remind them of the actions of the Romans, to you, to them. You name the taxes, the floggings, the gods disrespected, the groves desecrated. You speak plainly. Because rage doesn't need poetry. The tribes get together. The Trinovantes come first. Old enemies of Rome, then others. Britons who never trusted you before suddenly see you not as royalty, but as vengeance given flesh. You sharpen not just weapons, but memory. You apply blue woad to your face. Like ice, it discolors your skin. It isn't just for intimidation. Though it works, it's ritual, a rebirth. You are not the woman who was beaten, you are the storm she became. Your army grows, thousands upon thousands, peasants with sickles, warriors with blades, druids with eyes that stare too long. Even the old and lame bring something, food, horses, tails. You are a chariot rider, iron-bladed wheels cutting mud. Your daughters ride with you, not as ornaments, but as omens. You are a family affair now, a mother, not just of children, but of rebellion. Word reaches Roman ears, of course. At first they laugh. The queen leading an army, how quaint. Scouts then report the numbers, size, coordination. Rome stops laughing, but they still don't believe you'll actually do anything. After all, Britons bicker. Tribes feud. Women mourn. They don't lead wars. Cities are not burned by them. You're not here to live up to expectations, though. Your purpose is to burn them. Your campfires are emitting smoke, but the smoke will rise from theirs very soon. They continue to arrive, the first of many, then hundreds, then thousands. They ride in on horseback, on foot, through chariot and cart. Some people dress in wool cloaks, others arrive almost nude, flowing blue in color, eyes bright with something between faith and fury. There are farmers who've never held a weapon, and warriors who've forgotten what it's like not to. A boy no older than your daughters insists on bringing a slingshot made from his father's belt. You don't send him home. You nod, because this isn't a rebellion anymore. This is a reckoning. The Roman word for you now is terra muliebris, the fear of a female. You can picture them whispering it near burning. Half worried, half teasing. It should haunt their dreams, you hope. Your camp develops into a metropolis on wheels. To sell bread, traders show up. Talismans and arrows in the shape of your chariot. Before the first actual combat is fought, bards start writing songs. Like a prayer, your name is uttered. Or, depending on who is listening, a threat. You maintain order, though. Scouts are chosen by you, messengers, leaders of clans and villages. Chaos is not what you desire. Rome will never predict what you want. Arrangement. The fires burn brightly every night. The languages used by the druids to chant are older than empires. You use blood to bless weapons. Pigs sometimes, occasionally. No, you don't inquire. Although there isn't a formal head count, the Romans will thereafter assert that your force numbered over 100,000. You are not taken into account. You sense them. The warmth. The sound. 10,000 dreams pushing on the wheels of your chariot. Your daughters sleep under a bear pelt close to you. You observe them. They sleep like kids. They march like queens, though. You gaze upon the gathered troops, your people, your rage, your fire, and you believe that Rome was terrified of this. They were correct. Caesar is not you. You don't have a gold crown. However, you're being followed, not to conquer, for fairness, not for money, for retribution. You clutch your spear more tightly. There will soon be a Roman city in the distance. And behind you, an unforgettably spear-filled sea. First, you decide on Camulodunum, the Roman settlement on the outskirts of Iceni territory. It was formerly a tribal stronghold. Now it's a Roman veteran settlement, fat with smugness and marble, a model city for civilizing the Britons. It even has a temple. Not to your gods, of course. No, they've built a gleaming shrine to Emperor Claudius, their dead emperor, as if worshipping a Roman corpse somehow legitimizes the living ones. The locals call it sacred. Your people call it offensive architecture. You don't arrive quietly. The scouts see you coming, or more precisely, they see the dust cloud you bring with you. Your army is too large to hide. To be honest, you have no desire to hide. For traitors, subtlety is reserved. It's a warning. Roman authorities rush. There aren't any legions here, only the families of retiring troops, men who believed they had finished their work. They equip themselves with display armor and rusting weapons. They are preparing speeches, not defenses, when you get there. You don't give them any time or quarter. In a few hours, the city collapses. Like a tide, your army moves, destroying gates, bringing down columns and setting villas on fire. The fearful are driven into the small alleyways by your circling chariots. The people of Rome cry out for pity. You recall yelling once as well. Not today, though. The last to collapse is Claudius's temple. The defenders pray to plaster and stone as they shut themselves within. Burning it down takes 2 days. The fire is gradual and thorough, like your memories, not because of opposition. By day 3, Camulodunum has turned to ash. The message is then sent. A city has been lost by Rome, to no other empire, not to an opposing army, however to the very people it said had already been subdued. Among the ruins you stand. You're not smiling. This isn't happiness, it's essential. The wind changes. Your cloak is covered in smoke. Behind you, your girls gather scraps of charred bronze, temple-related trophies. You permitted them. They deserve to carry weight. This is just the start. The next target is more significant, bigger and wealthier. And very, very Roman, Londinium. You don't rest long. You can't. Word gets around like wildfire. Fear is no exception. Rome is now aware. Rome then answers, but not quickly enough. On your way to Londinium, you ride south. Roman Britain's crown gem, a centre for trade, an artery for commerce. Though young, it's busy, crowded with colonists, troops and merchants. It's the future of the empire, they say. You choose to preempt that future. People start to run along the road. They are not pursued by you. You don't have to. No banner works, as well as their panic. You know your message is getting across when refugees outrun soldiers. You see it by the time you get to the edge of Londinium. There are no more red cloaks. Hard-charging Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus returned in time to retreat while he was occupied, quelling a rebellion in Wales. He did the most Roman thing he could after examining your numbers, fires, and smoke-darkened sky. He went out. To rescue the province, he left the city. You don't think twice. The Londinium is open. Parade-ready streets are now covered in ash. The markets that used to sell honeyed dates and olive oil are cleaned up and then destroyed. Bathhouses, warehouses, and Roman residences were all reduced to cinders. Some people choose to stay. Some people think they will be protected by the empire. Some people are just too sluggish, too old, or too arrogant. You make one last offer. The gods of your land and mine will judge you if you don't leave now. You are ignored by many. What follows will be referred to as a bloodbath by history. Of course, the Romans will count the corpses. They'll say tens of thousands. That might be the case. However, you are aware of this. The world now pays attention to you after you were ignored. You discover a half-burned Roman ledger among the flames. In addition to debts, it mentions Iceni names. You throw it in the fire and continue to move. This time, no temples are spared. You use your own hands to tear down the sculptures. No pity is shown to the gods who witnessed your daughter's suffering. It's quiet in Londinium by dusk. The city no longer screams. Fueled by rage and smoke, you ride forth with an army that is bigger than before. The next target has been selected, Verulamium. Then there was the reckoning. It's not simply Roman Verulamium, it's an ambitious Roman. Streets with imported stone paving, fountains without requesting authorization, villas larger than the majority of tribal clearings. It isn't a military installation, it's a declaration, a courteous one, encased in tariffs and mosaics. Then you go there, the message is ahead of you by now. Camulodunum of Londinium is known to the merchants of Verulamium. They are aware of what happens to people who embrace Rome too enthusiastically. Rich people fill their trolleys. With ledgers full of unpaid grain and silver gods in their hands, they run west. You release them. You've discovered that vengeance has a timetable. When you get there, you don't encounter resistance. It's void. The troops have left. The politicians have left. Only the unlucky remain. and a few who simply didn't believe in you. The kind of people who assumed no mother, no woman, no tribal queen could make the empire tremble. You demonstrate differently. Like rotten fruit, the gates open, the streets are flooded with your warriors. Then there are flames. Once intended to inspire awe, the town center crumbles beneath its own arrogance. You destroy the temple even though it is empty. The bathhouses hiss like snakes that are dying. Statues get melted. The market stalls burn. A scroll drops at your feet after being flung from a balcony. You look down. Latin, numerical columns, and a single term that is used frequently. Honor. You grin. A gloomy, unfunny item. Additionally, throw it into the fire. The city is not the only place that burns. That's what it represented. The future was supposed to be Verulamium, a Romanized Britain, a place where Latin silenced the old songs and wine replaced mead. And rather than taking the lead, a woman like you would bow. It's rubble and smoke instead. It is finished by the third day. 3 Roman towns have been completely destroyed by fire. With each step and ember, your army grows. Some people join because they have faith, some due to fear, some because they are at a loss for somewhere to go. You don't inquire as to why. All you do is ride forward. The body has been hit by you. Rome will now lash out with its teeth. A defense is being prepared by the governor, and the last conflict is approaching. Now you are riding through ash. It sticks to your hair, your breath, and your boots. The sacrifice made to the gods is now complete. 3 Roman towns burned to the bones. Like fragile trees, their columns fell to the ground. Your message is written in burned stone and smoke, but the weight is beginning to wear on you. Not regret? No. However, there are consequences. You have a huge army, unpredictable, wonderful, a little bloated too, too many mouths, too much treasure, insufficient self-control. The stolen pottery makes the chariots creak. Some warriors wear Roman tunics hung like trophies and wear gold necklaces while riding. Some have substituted wine jugs for spears. They continue to cheer you up. Your name is still chanted by them. However, things are evolving. This military force. Vengeance is no longer the only option. It has evolved into velocity, mystique, and movement. Furthermore, motion never stops. Whispers reach your ears. When are you going to stop? Why haven't you already marched against the Roman fortifications, others ask. Others, who are more truthful, inquire as to where the next treasure will be found. Justice has supporters. Treasure, however, has investors. Even the Druids sense it. Ritual is what they demand. Grounding, something that will prevent the center from collapsing. You give a nod, but don't say much. You can feel the tilt as well. You continue to ride in front. Now hardened, your daughters will always be by your side. You look at the fire and count the days since it all started, though, while they are sleeping. Retaliation should taste sharper, right? Rather, it tastes of smoke and iron, an endlessly bitter tea. Rome is reorganizing. This time, Suetonius has brought a genuine army back from Wales. Hardened veterans, close-knit groups, actual self-control. He's picked a battleground, you hear. A wooded, narrow valley behind him. No flanks to surprise. There's nowhere for your untamed cavalry to roam. You've set cities on fire. However, cities don't defend themselves. You will now encounter soldiers, actual ones, those who remain calm in the face of your cries. Who doesn't hear gods in the wind or run when they see blue battle paint? You've got numbers, tens of thousands. He is precise, though. The gods still favor you, according to the Druids. The signs remain potent. However, when the arrows begin to fall, omens lose their structure. You've been advancing for a very long time. Realizing what's happening takes a moment. Rome is not running away. They've made their decision. A slender valley with hills and trees on either side. Your chariots have nowhere to move, no space to flank, only a hallway, a funnel, a trap. You come confidently. Why wouldn't you? The horizon is stretched by your armies. Druids, farmers and warriors, even former slaves carrying kitchen knives while marching. You are more than 10 times as many as the Romans. So far, you have been blessed by the gods. Why not once more? But something about this field feels different. The Romans are waiting, not panicking, not rushing. They have polished their shields. They create close formations. Not even their faces are visible. Only solitude and iron walls. They're not sprinting, they're prepared. You get your forces in line. Banners fly up. The war horns are honking. Your daughters, with their brilliant and piercing gaze, ride next to you. You raise your voice to heaven. A prayer, a shout, a proclamation. After that, you charge. The Roman wall also remains stationary. Like waves hitting a precipice, your warriors crash into it. Again and again. It's thunder, snapping spears, crashing shields, cracking voices. However, their line is unbreakable. It's always true. The valley works against you. The field is clogged with your numbers. There isn't any flexibility. To back off, to breathe even, the wall that holds you in place is your own men, then. The counterattack. Rome does more than merely defend. It moves forward. Slowly, cruelly, just in time, like swords and clockwork. Your lines are punctured by the wedge forms. The horsemen charge in. What started off as a charge turns into a crush, a path. You scream until your throat goes hoarse. You try to reach the front to pull your daughters back. But the press is too thick, the chariots jammed, the bodies too many. This was unexpected, not in this place, not in this manner. Ash and the sound of falling spears are now carried by the wind that previously carried flames. This isn't a conflict, it's the opposite. The Romans have recollected their identity. They have finished running. You remain to the very end, even when the ground turns red underfoot and the cries subside. Even as crows, rather than heavenly fire, flood the sky. Even as the Roman blades fall one by one on your men, who once sounded your name like a war drum. You don't run. When your chariot is no longer able to move, you dismount. You pull out your sword. Iron. At the edge they dulled, but quite sharp for this. In the midst of the crush you discover your daughters. They're still alive, bloodied, breathing. You press your foreheads together. No words. Just recognition, shared fire, shared end. Druids have already perished. Steel muffled their chants. Your military force? Lost. A few people stepped on it. Others are broken. Others are running away into the forest. Rome doesn't pursue. It need not. It was a surgical war. Ruthless in its effectiveness. A lesson in action. You brought a surge of tidal action. They brought a dam. It held, too. You only back off when absolutely necessary. Like a shadow slipping into the trees. Not far from the battlefield, you discover a hollow. Keep quiet. Not touched. With you are your daughters. You three are seated under a gnarled yew. You observe the gradual, ponderous swaying of the branches, similar to how the soil itself breathes. This was more than just a loss. Something older than Rome was coming to an end. The ancient gods. The traditional methods. Britain's aspiration to become its own country, the claim that you poisoned yourself will be written, that you decided to die rather than be captured, that might be the case, perhaps not. Really, nobody will ever know. What matters is this: you didn't die on your knees, you didn't die silent. You rose, you burned, you fought. You left the empire with a lasting scar. The Romans are going to declare triumph. Suetonius, however, will acknowledge it. Your rebellion nearly lost them, Britain. You weren't just a queen, you were a storm in human form. And even after your body returns to the earth, the name Boudica will echo, through fear, through fire, through every woman who refuses to be forgotten. The battlefield is quiet now. Suetonius, the Roman governor, surveys the carnage. His soldiers stack the dead, strip bodies, and gather weapons. Effective, gritty labor, records are necessary for history. And before the blood has even dried, Rome, ever pragmatic, starts rewriting. They refer to it as a triumph. They do, of course. Boudica died honorably, they say, or in a dishonorable manner, or vanished. Nobody is in agreement. According to Tacitus, she consumed poison. Cassius Dio implies disease. According to some, she became a legend after riding into the mist. A good tale. Marketing is simple. Rome, however, wants closure. A footnote-worthy item. Your daughters completely disappear from the record, which is Rome's way of acknowledging that you frightened them. The Romans still rule Britain, but suddenly things are different. New temples to Claudius are not constructed by the empire. It fortifies the settlements, garrisons more troops, and tightens the reins. Yes, they are in charge. But with caution, occasionally looking over one's shoulder, they will act as though you were an anomaly, a second, a tantrum. However, cities are not burned by moments. Nations are not rallied by outbursts. Rome was unable to annex anything but you. A myth. Years go by, centuries. Like all civilizations, this one falls. However, your name endures, whispered through the woodlands of Britain, engraved on stones, sung in defiant, firelit halls. They make you into a representation, a queen sometimes, a goddess sometimes, a mother of the country sometimes. The Victorians, always sentimental, will build a bronze statue of you in London, chariot wheels turning, daughters at your side, just before the charge, forever frozen. You were demoted to tourist inspiration after almost destroying the empire. You don't mind, though. Myths are obstinate. Furthermore, heat remains after a fire has been extinguished. Every insurrection has your shadow. Your footsteps resound with each march. Every woman has a whisper when she is told to sit down and keep silent. Boudica didn't. You are buried beneath the wreckage of your defeat by history. However, it is never able to hold the ground still. You're still here. You have roots. What about the ashes? They have the ability to conceive. First, let's talk about the smoke. Slim, curling, enduring. Slowly, in the calm air of a hall of worship, it rises. The kind of area that was designed to be quiet. Ancient Mesopotamia is where you are. Or Egypt, maybe. Or even an Indian temple. It isn't very important. It's very much the same. Fragrances are not a luxury here. It is essential. Priests in robes and bare feet wield little clay burners or bronze censers that are filled with embers that light. They dump resin on these, hardened tree sap beads collected from faraway places, with its vivid citrus edge, frankincense, myrrh. Darker, earthy. It's almost bitter. It sizzles as soon as it comes into contact with the coal. Then he smokes. Next, fragrances. The air is no longer air. It is sanctified. They went one step further in the Egyptian temples. A mixture called kaifi was carefully made. A combination of more than a dozen components. Wine, sweetheart, raisins, juniper. Among them is cinnamon. The cooking did not take place during the day. It was made at nightfall when the coldness made it easier for scents to rise. Kaifi was more than just a scent. In itself, it was a rite. It was made through prayer. It was an offering when it was burned. Its scent was thought to soothe the gods and the deceased. Camphor and sandalwood served comparable purposes in ancient India. In Greek temples, hymns were accompanied by the burning of aromatic woods and resins. The burning of incense was governed by precise measurements in early Israelite tradition. It was thought to be harmful to use too much or the incorrect combination. rules applied to divine things. Why is fragrance receiving so much attention? Because fragrance served as a conduit for the ancients, a path that connects the divine and the mortal. Scent persists and is invisible. Unlike songs or sculptures, it can move in any direction. Even if you close your eyes, it still gets to you. That made it sacrosanct to the ancient peoples. Thus the temples continued to smell. Not only at the ceremony, the air itself turned into a sacrifice. A location could have a sacred scent, and perhaps, just possibly, you could smell holy if a place did. Now take a breath as though you were standing there, and then let it out. Allow the smoke to ascend and subside. Let us now travel eastward to the dazzling metropolis of Alexandria and the warm coastlines of Egypt. Imagine a pleasant, salty air laden with sandalwood and jasmine that comes from the Mediterranean. The Queen of the Nile, ruler, linguist, and seduction alchemist Cleopatra was more than just a perfumer. She turned it into a legend. Few monarchs were able to fully comprehend what Cleopatra understood. The nose retains its memory. Scent stays long after words have faded and gold has dimmed. It sticks in your mind. She therefore used it to command as much as to entice. She was more than just scented. She was unforgettable. Plutarch, the Roman historian, reported that Cleopatra once had her royal barge's sails saturated in perfume, oils of rose and cinnamon. This allowed people to smell her coming long before she was visible. She was surrounded by carefully regulated air. Before you saw Cleopatra, you could smell her. Long after she was gone, you could still remember her. In the perfume labs within the castle, attendants blended oils with rare resins from India and Arabia, as well as myrrh and balsam. These weren't merely tasty mixtures. They were examined by Cleopatra. She tried things out. She thought that some smells could change fate, induce desire, or even induce sleep. She was not mistaken. Even though she practiced aromatherapy thousands of years before the term was coined, her scents were more than just romantic. They served as political instruments. Cleopatra was already a master of time, attire, and scent when she first encountered Julius Caesar and then Mark Antony. She was aware of which oils to use in what situations. Temples use frankincense, banquets use neroli, while private rooms use musk and spikenard. Each note has a function. According to one account, Cleopatra reportedly made a perfume so seductive that a general forgot his own identity. It could be fiction. However, one thing is for sure. She was the only monarch to turn aroma into a language. Cleopatra did not consider perfume to be a luxury. Power was the issue. It was a plan, a whisper that is conveyed through the air itself rather than a voice. So if your room is quiet tonight, picture her passing by. She won't be heard by you. However, you might smell cinnamon, rose, and honeyed wind, and that will suffice. Let the breeze now transport us to the marble courtyards of ancient Greece and Rome, where we can find lengthy walks of philosophy, columns, and manuscripts. However, we're not here to argue tonight. Fragrances are why we are here. The Greeks were curious about fragrance. They thought scent was more than just ornamentation. It influenced morality as well as behavior. The father of medicine, Hippocrates, suggested massages and scented baths to keep the body and mind in balance. Rosemary oil wasn't simply nice to him, it was therapeutic. Sandalwood calmed, myrrh was cleansed. The soul was aligned by scent. However, not everybody was in agreement. Plato, the philosopher, was suspicious of perfume. Perfumes, in his opinion, softened character and made people indulgent and lazy. He maintained that a powerful citizen should smell like intelligence, olive oil, and hard labor rather than fancy spices. In reality, however, the majority of Greeks disregarded him. Fragrances continued to be popular during athletic festivals, weddings, and banquets. In addition to being fashionable, Lavender or mint wreaths were worn on the head to maintain mental clarity. When the Romans arrived, they did more than simply use Greek fragrances. They made the whole situation worse. Everything was scented by the Romans. To emit fragrance at every step, they bathed in rosewater, scented their clothing with saffron, and even dusted the floors with perfume dust. Between dishes at elaborate feasts, visitors were anointed with oils. Fountains that sprayed scented water into the air were owned by certain rich Romans. At one point, Emperor Nero commanded the whole roof to shower his guests with myrrh and rose petals. Even the Romans, however, had disagreements over excess. The baths smelled of too many fragrances, not of people, but of a bouquet, according to the Stoic philosopher Seneca the Younger. He believed that virtue didn't wear cologne. Nonetheless, perfumes continued to play a significant role in Roman romance, ritual, and death. Glass, alabaster, or clay perfume vials were interred alongside the deceased. Scent was for remembering, not only for the living. Perfumes traversed the boundaries between luxury and necessity, virtue and vice, in both ancient Greece and ancient Rome. They have the ability to alter a room's atmosphere or a moment's memory, despite being unseen. We now travel back in time to the birthplace of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, where rivers cradle reeds and ziggurats rise like stairs to the heavens. Scent was already a major obsession here, long before Cleopatra's perfumed sails or Roman rosewater fountains. Perfume formulas can be found in clay tablets that are over 4,000 years old. Some were devoted to monarchs, while others were to gods. These early perfumers combined crushed flowers, herbs, and resins with animal fats or pressed oils, as well as myrrh, calamus root, cypress, and even pulverized cedar into a paste. These blends weren't arbitrary. They adhered to methods and proportions. Cuneiform, the earliest known perfume handbook, was used to record everything. Status was closely linked to scent. Every day, the priests of the great temples anointed the sculptures of the gods with holy oils rather than water. It was deemed sacrilege to ignore a god's statue's scenting. Order in the cosmos was preserved by fragrance. Good-smelling things were pure. It was chaos that stank. The hanging gardens may or may not have been in Babylon, but there were undoubtedly fragrant plants like roses, thyme, and coriander. The palace gardens had purposes beyond food and aesthetics. They were factories that produced perfumes. The air itself turned into an extension of power when the wind swept through them. In courtship, perfume was also important. Men of rank would send gifts of oil-soaked handkerchiefs or perfumed clothing, according to Assyrian chronicles. Without using words, these movements said a lot. They said, "I smell like wealth. I am worthy of being remembered." Perfume was also used in burial ceremonies in Mesopotamia. The tomb was stocked with perfumed items and the body was cleaned with oils. Scent was status in life. It was dignity in dying. They thought that scent would aid in the spirit's gentle passage. Then there were the business people. In search of spices and resin, Babylonian traders traveled great distances. One of the first international networks, the fragrance trade, connected Egypt, Arabia, and the Indus Valley in a peaceful, aromatic commerce. Myrrh was as expensive as gold. Now that the sands have settled, enter silently into the center of ancient Egypt, where fragrance served as a portal to eternity rather than just a pleasure. In Egypt, ritual, medicine, and the afterlife were all inextricably linked to perfume. The living weren't the only ones, it was for the deceased. As a result, embalming became the pinnacle of perfumery. The procedure was complex. Palm wine was used to purify rather than cleanse the body. Then, to extract moisture, natron, a type of natural salt, was used. This is where the scent starts, though. The body was covered in layers of oils, cedarwood, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and juniper berries after it had been desiccated. These choices weren't made at random. Every fragrance had a symbolic meaning, and every oil had a spiritual function. Frankincense was believed to ward off evil because of its citrusy taste. Myrrh stood for recovery. The body was warmed by cinnamon. These oils did more than simply preserve, they dedicated. Mummification was not just done to prevent rotting. Its purpose was to change the body into something sacred, divine, and fragrant. The ancient Egyptians thought that the gods' breath was pleasant, and that the gods themselves smelt wonderful. You have to smell like a deity to get into the afterlife. The wrappings were scented as well. Oil-soaked linen was carefully layered in spirals around the torso. In between folds were amulets. Archaeologists have discovered tiny perfume jars in some royal tombs that are still sealed and contain remnants of a thick, resinous paste that is thousands of years old but still has a subtle scent. The funerary offerings also included perfume. Near the sarcophagus were jars of kefi, the holy incense mixture. During mourning rituals, wigs were adorned with perfumed cones. During the ceremony, these wax cones, which were perfumed with honey and lotus, would gradually melt in the heat, anointing the head and releasing aroma. It was a theater of sight and smell. Death did not smell of rotting to the Egyptians. It had the scent of pine resin, myrrh, and eternity. Now let's trace the history of smell rather than armies or empires. Persistent, invisible, and extremely precious. This is the tale of the origins of spices, the ancient trade routes that gave rise to scent, its bottling and distribution, and its journey throughout civilizations. The components for perfumes had to be hunted, gathered, and transported, sometimes over thousands of miles, long before they were mass-produced. Frankincense from southern Arabia, where trees flowed golden resin, myrrh from the Horn of Africa, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, and spikenard from the Himalayas. These were money, not only exotic scents. The demand remained steady. Greece loved rose oil, Egypt needed myrrh, Babylon desired frankincense, and Rome wanted everything. However, none of these societies possessed every component. Merchants therefore set out in flimsy ships, camel caravans, and ox carts. Carrying their goods in clay pots or goatskin pouches, they traversed scalding deserts and choppy oceans. Ingredients for perfumes were valuable and ephemeral. A merchant's riches could be ruined by a single shattered jar of oil. However, the benefits? Huge. A pound of cinnamon was worth more than silver at one time. Ideas, methods, and recipes also traveled along these pathways. Not only was perfume exchanged, it was changed. Perfumers in India experimented with distillation. In Arabia, they developed methods for oil maceration and enfleurage that capture floral essences. Fragrances were interwoven with poetry, healing, and heaven itself in Persia. By the time the materials arrived in Greece or Rome, they were carrying stories along with their aroma. Not only was a vial of spikenard strange, it was fabled. It had been bargained for by kings. It would one day be used to anoint saints. These historic routes, which spanned from China to the Mediterranean, were identified by their odor rather than by markers or landmarks. The air would be heavy with sandalwood, saffron, and cardamom if you were to walk into a market in Damascus. With Petra, you would come upon walls covered with rose petals and resin as you turned a corner. The cities had a worldly scent. Let's now gently enter the hallowed groves and stone temples of ancient India, where people worshipped fragrance rather than merely wearing it. Scent permeated every aspect of life, medicine, ritual, love, and philosophy in India. Incense and perfumes are described as offerings to the gods in the Vedas, which are among the oldest known texts. Burning offerings of ghee, camphor, and sandalwood was done to elevate prayer rather than cover up odors. It was believed that scent purified souls rather than locations. Sandalwood, which was cooling, creamy, and silky, was one of the most admired. It was ground into a paste and put on the bodies of the deceased, to priests' foreheads, and to statues of deities. Both gods and humans found the aroma to be soothing. Applying it meant putting oneself in harmony with peace. Other well-liked components were jasmine, vetiver, and agar wood. Jasmine garlands were used for more than simply festival and wedding decorations. They were thought to arouse sentiments of heavenly connection and affection. In classical Sanskrit poetry, lovers frequently used smell in addition to beauty to describe one another. There was no such thing as a perfume bottle. Rather, it was freshly blended. Petals were soaked in coconut or sesame oil, occasionally with milk, to extract the oils, which were then filtered through a fine cloth. Attars, concentrated natural scents valued for their complexity, were created by this methodical, laborious technique. The connection between Indian perfumery and healing and meditation, however, was arguably its most noteworthy feature. Certain scents were believed to balance the body's energy, or doshas, in the Ayurvedic philosophy. Cooling vetiver, for instance, reduced inflammation. Slow circulation was roused by warming cinnamon. According to this theory, the nose served as the brain's entryway, and hence the doorway to consciousness. Incense was also essential. Prayers were carried above the temple halls by thin sticks of fragrant smoke that coiled toward the ceiling. Families welcomed and let go of the day by lighting incense in their houses at sunrise and sunset. Millions of people still do the rites silently, respectfully, and without speaking. Now let's enter ancient China, a place of harmony, quiet, and understated beauty. Scent was not ostentatious or loud here. It muttered. Like calligraphy, it floated softly in the air. Perfume was not associated with ornamentation or seduction in early Chinese society. It had to do with harmony. Scent brought the inner and outer worlds into harmony and matched the spirit with nature. It was not fashion but philosophy. Incense was significantly more common among the ancient Chinese than oils. Oils were viewed as being excessively forceful and powerful. In contrast, incense was disciplined. It could be timed, measured, and molded. Hours passed as thin coils burnt, signaling the end of the day. Monks at Buddhist temples focused their meditation by burning incense made of sandalwood and agar wood. The gentle smoke guided the attention inward and acted as a clock and compass. Scholars of Confucianism also had a strong devotion to incense. Without a bronze censer smouldering softly in the corner, a peaceful study would not be complete. It was believed that the aroma helped clear the mind before writing or studying. It wasn't ornamentation, it was getting ready. Fragrances represented qi, the life force, in Taoist practice. Your body was most likely out of balance if the air around you smelled off. In addition to enhancing fragrance, aromatic herbs like clove, cassia bark, and star anise were recommended for reviving health. Spirit, medicine, and fragrance were all one. Clothes had a fragrance as well. Fragrant plants were placed into tiny pouches known as xiang nang, which were worn at the waist. These weren't merely nice, they were guardians. Wearing plants like patchouli and mugwort was thought to protect against evil and illness. Such sachets evolved into an art form throughout the Tang and Song dynasties, when they were embroidered, embellished, and given as gifts at festivals. Poetry also made use of perfume. The great Tang poets frequently used scent rather than color or sound to describe the seasons. Autumn brought fallen leaves and ancient wood, and spring brought plum blooms. The aroma left by a person could reveal something about their memories or character. Let's take one last breath, one that transcends time, rivers and deserts, castles and temples. We go back to the here and now. However, the scent of the ancient world persists, however subtly. Ancient perfumery has lost a lot of its historical knowledge. Priests, doctors, and perfumers guarded the recipes which were held as secrets. Some recipes were written on papyrus scrolls, while others were written on clay tablets. Conquest, flood, or fire claimed many lives. Fragrance manuscripts were found in the major libraries of Alexandria and Nineveh. None of them made it out alive, and yet there are still whispers here and there. A 2,000-year-old perfume factory was discovered in Cyprus by archaeologists in 2012. Olive oil, lavender, and burnt clay vats. Residues discovered in tomb jars in Egypt pointed to myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus oil combinations. Based on historical sources, academics in Israel have tried to recreate the Ketoret, the hallowed temple incense. The components? Still up for debate, still revered. Cleopatra's scents have also been reinvented, based on antiquated formulas and residue from Egyptian perfume bottles. A group of academics claimed to have replicated one of her signature mixtures in 2019. The outcome? Earthy, spicy, dark, and lingering. Something older, something more profound, not the type of perfume you see in stores today. After all, perfume is essentially oil-suspended memory. It speaks tales inaudibly. It holds you, but you can't hold it. 1,000 years can be carried by a single drop. The descendants of those antiquated fragrances are still present now in medicine, ceremonies, and flowers that are preserved between pages. Like in China, contemporary perfumers continue to use oud made from agar wood. Like in Mesopotamia, they continue to utilize frankincense and myrrh. Rose oil, which Cleopatra preferred, is still pricey and adored. Scent is still considered sacrosanct. Incense is lit prior to meditation. Prior to a particular evening, perfume is sprayed, using rose water to wash a loved one's hands. These gestures are ancient. We just forgot how ancient. There was a sound to start. Something milder than a hound's yelp or the clank of chains. A murmur passed from one individual to another while it was dark. Behind church pews and cottage doors, it was neither a threat nor a name. It was a guide. North. Enslaved African Americans started escaping the American South's farms in the early 1800s, not just with support, but also with fervent hope. There was no such thing as an underground railroad. No trains or tracks were present. It was a secret network of locations, people, and plans. Memory-etched routes, safe houses that pass for regular farms, trapdoor-equipped barn lofts, wagons with a false bottom. Behind walls are cellars. Using only the stars, particularly the North Star, to guide them, conductors, who were frequently free black Americans, white abolitionists, or former slaves themselves, led fugitives on foot at night. They traversed forests, rivers, and wetlands. They slept in hollow trees and haystacks. They were also aware that a single incorrect knock may result in either capture or death. However, the system was effective, and it got out. With the use of songs, quilts, and code words to identify trustworthy homes, word of mouth became the most effective signal. One window had a lantern, a specific flower that was put in front. Everything had a purpose. There was no centralization, no headquarters were present. It was a living thing, molded by secret and based on courage, and it was totally dependent on trust. With no assurance of safety, someone who risked all to run had to rely on strangers in unfamiliar places. Nevertheless, they fled. In areas that U.S. laws did not reach, such as Canada, the Underground Railroad extended from the Deep South to northern states like Ohio and Pennsylvania by the middle of the 20th century. Through this unseen network, thousands of people managed to flee, and countless unsung heroes were responsible for each escape. Farmers, clergy, educators, and families who risked incarceration offered their bread and opened their doors for the freedom of a stranger. It was an act of conscience rather than rebellion. Of people, footsteps crept through creeks and cornfields in the stillness of those evenings, edging closer to freedom. Steam was not used to power the railroad. It was powered by murmurs and hope. She had a gentle voice, was only 5 feet tall, and had a scar on her head that prevented her from falling asleep at night. However, people tracked Harriet Tubman's movements and the chains were broken. Harriet Tubman was born into slavery in Maryland somewhere around 1822, and she witnessed firsthand the cruelty of bondage. Before she became an adult, she had been beaten, whipped, and almost died. Her skull was once cracked by a huge iron weight that an overseer threw. She thought the intense, dreamlike images were messages from God, and it left her with headaches for the rest of her life. Harriet escaped by herself in 1849. Walking through the woods, marshes, and danger, she followed the North Star. It would have sufficed for survival. Harriet wasn't done, though. She returned again, and time again. Harriet Tubman led more than 70 enslaved persons to freedom during her estimated 13 trips back to the South over the span of 10 years. She never lost any of them. None of the individuals in her charge were apprehended, an accomplishment so remarkable that, even during her lifetime, it became legendary. She carried a pistol to keep others from going back. In addition to protecting her from slave catchers, there was too much at stake. You continued on if you were with Harriet. In honor of the biblical leader who led his people out of Egypt, they named her Moses. She depended on faith just like Moses, but also on careful preparation, divine timing, and reliable allies. She was aware of which places to stay away from, which houses to stop at, and which rivers to cross. She moved at night, communicating in code with melodies and bird cries. In the end, Harriet Tubman rose to prominence as one of the South's most sought-after ladies. No one ever turned her in, despite a $40,000 reward, an enormous amount at the time, being offered for her capture. She would go on to become a suffragist, a nurse, and a spy for the Union Army. Her legend, however, was created by her experience on the Underground Railroad, not as a myth, but rather as a testament to what one person can do in the face of a system designed to destroy them. Half a country was not set free by Harriet Tubman. She just would not abandon anyone. No printed maps, train timetables, or signage indicating the freedom next exit were present. The foundation of the Underground Railroad was silence, trust, and memory. Every step of the journey needed to be recalled rather than recorded. The front of each safe home had to resemble a typical farmhouse, but the interior had to be completely different. Routes differed according on the threat level, time, and location. Others traveled the Ohio rivers, the winding roadways of Pennsylvania, or the thick forests of the Carolinas. Many ended up in Canada, where they could not be forced to return by U.S. law. However, the journey there required negotiating hundreds of miles of betrayal, bounty hunters, and slave patrols. The system's ingenuity entered the picture at that point. Abolitionists, Quakers, free black families, and benevolent farmers frequently called safe places or stations home. These houses may have false walls leading to candlelit cellars, trapdoors in kitchen floors, or secret rooms beneath staircases. During the day, some even transported passengers in hollowed-out carts with artificial bottoms. Conductors were the individuals that led fugitives from one secure area to another. They frequently ran the possibility of being arrested or worse if caught, and they committed entire networks, landmarks, friendly residences, and hazardous locations to memory. These conductors have to be fully trusted by the passengers. There was no turning back. However, how could they convey all of this information without alerting authorities or slave owners' code? There could be two meanings to a song sung in the fields. There was more to follow the drinking gourd than just music. It was a list of guidelines. With its handle pointing to the North Star, a celestial compass that directs people north, the drinking gourd represented the Big Dipper. Patterns on quilts put on fences could suggest safety. A lantern in a window, a particular flower in a pot, a zigzag indicating impending danger, a log cabin for shelter, or a star for guidance. These were the sanctuary's indicators. It was all routine. Nevertheless, everything was a part of something remarkable. On the Underground Railroad, people weren't spared by chance. It was a design, accurate, patient, and incredibly human. You could follow but not see the map, with footsteps and faith. Freedom was never truly free. The cost to those who boarded the Underground Railroad was enormous, paid in sacrifice, terror, and quiet, in addition to footsteps. More was at stake for fugitive slaves than being apprehended. Even in free northern states, laws such as the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 made it profitable and lawful for anybody to capture an escaped slave and return them in exchange for a reward. The law penalized people who assisted fugitives with fines and jail time and obliged residents to aid in recapture. There was always a chance of being pulled back south, even for those who had been free for years. Every step posed a risk to the escapees. Patrols inspected highways and forests while mounted. Dogs were taught to follow the scent of people. There were descriptions on wanted posters, wounds, skin tone, height, and incentives that are alluring enough to persuade neighbors to become informants. They still ran, though. Families were frequently split apart. With the promise to return, a mother may flee with one child and abandon the others. A few did. Many were unable to. The trip was lengthy, and if caught, the punishment was severe. Whipping, imprisonment, mutilation, death. But it wasn't just runners who were in risk. They also sought down the conductors and allies who let themselves in. An estimated 3,000 fugitives were assisted by people like Levi Coffin, a white Quaker businessman in Indiana, who did so despite knowing that he may lose everything. Particularly black abolitionists were at considerably higher risk. When free African Americans were seen helping fugitives, they were sometimes suspected of being fugitives themselves and taken into slavery. Sometimes the cost was borne by entire communities. Safe houses were torched in certain towns. In others, members of the Underground Railroad were attacked or expelled. But they continued. For a lot of people, the question was not if it was legal. The question was if it was correct. These were not trained revolutionaries or skilled spies. They were mothers, children, ministers, teachers, and farmers. Despite the dreadful repercussions, regular individuals are performing incredible feats. It was not the existence of the Underground Railroad that was significant. It was that it never stopped, no matter how much it cost. Defiance was demonstrated by each lantern that was lit in a window. There was a silent revolution with each door opened, and each stride made in the direction of freedom was a voluntarily accepted step into danger. One structure that served as more than a house of worship stood in the center of numerous black communities in the South and the North. It was a place to stay. It was a plan. It was a signal. The church. The black church was both a stronghold and a flame, sacred in many ways to people escaping slavery and those assisting them. While some religious gatherings were permitted by slave owners, unsupervised worship was frequently prohibited out of concern that so-called Negro spirituals might incite revolt. They weren't mistaken either. There was more than faith in those songs. They were information carriers. There was more to Swing Low, Sweet Chariot than just a hymn. There was a message that someone will soon be taken home by a chariot, conductor, or wagon, code for a trip north. Wade in the Water suggested that in addition to avoiding dogs, fugitives should cross rivers and streams to eliminate their scent. These kinds of songs were sung slowly, softly, and in time with labor. To white overseers they seemed innocuous, even calming. However, they were instructed by the enslaved under close observation. Particularly in the North, Church basements frequently served as hiding places. Food and sleeping quarters were concealed behind choir robes and hymnals in rooms nestled beneath the sanctuary. Occasionally, ministers acted as conductors, using their sermons to warn congregations about impending movements or threats, while disguising their messages in biblical terms that also functioned as operational briefings. One of the main hubs of abolitionist activity in Philadelphia was Mother Bethel AME Church, the country's first African Methodist Episcopal church. In Ohio, border churches were referred to as stations for their sympathetic members and covert back chambers in addition to their sermons. Slaves were able to congregate, sing, and exchange information through hushubas and prayer sessions deep in the forests, even in the South, where dangers were greatest. They employed rhythm and rhyme to retain complex instructions in a world where reading could cost you your life. It was not just shelter that the church provided. It spoke, it provided music, it offered harmony clothed in hope. Thus, voices would rise quietly in the darkness as the sun set and the fields became quiet. It sounded commendatory. It was a plan, though. No single race, group, or geographic area constructed the Underground Railroad. A tenuous coalition of farmers, ministers, educators, sailors, and store owners kept it together. For a cause bigger than themselves, each is putting their safety, their families, and frequently their lives in danger. Liberty. Some were well known, such as Philadelphia's William Still, a free black man who is frequently referred to as the founder of the Underground Railroad. In his capacity as the Vigilance Committee head, he kept track of the names, dates, and biographies of everyone under his supervision. His papers turned into some of the most important historical records we currently possess. He didn't preserve them for his own fame, though. He preserved them in the hopes that families might eventually reunite. Then there was Levi Coffin, a white Quaker businessman from Indiana, whose house was dubbed the Underground Railroad's Grand Central Station. He assisted thousands of fugitives alongside his wife, Catherine. Fake walls, secret rooms, and an extra pot on the stove were all features of their house. Despite numerous pleas for him to cease, Levi never concealed his efforts. He merely stated, "I knew my duty, but there were dozens more we'll never hear about for every known name." Innkeepers who left keys beneath stones, sailors who concealed fugitives in ship holds, children who kept watch at the window, and anonymous ladies who made disguises. Subtle updates and messages were published in abolitionist newspapers. Coded letters were delivered by couriers. Under the noses of their own relatives and neighbors, some white Southern allies even assisted individuals in escaping. Not all of these assistants shared the same political or religious beliefs. Some were quite religious, others were only motivated by an inexpressible sense of good and wrong. They were not required to be flawless. All they had to do was do something. And they did. Neither militaries nor institutions supported the Underground Railroad. It was fueled by regular individuals repeatedly and quietly doing the right thing. Credit was not requested. They just left a door open, lit a lantern, served food, and said in a whisper, "Go now." They disappeared into the past, leaving behind nothing but freedom. Freedom did not come with the final safe house in Ohio, or the first step off the plantation for many who traveled the Underground Railroad's secret rails. It encountered a border, but it was not merely a geographical one. Safety was indicated. It was a sign of survival. Canada was marked. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which made it possible to apprehend and bring back runaway slaves from nearly anywhere in the nation, made even the northern U.S. states dangerous in the early to mid-1800s. No documents, no inquiries. Freedom, until it was out of America's grasp, was brittle. So they continued. By 1834, Canada had outlawed slavery under British law. Slave catchers and U.S. law were unable to apprehend fugitives after they entered Ontario, frequently via Detroit, Buffalo, or upstate New York. They could breathe there, not without difficulty, not always in a safe way. However, legally, that was important. The trip was harsh. On foot, long distances were covered. Under the cover of darkness, rowboats had to traverse rivers. Ferrymen were bribed by some fugitives. Others walked across after waiting for the ice to form. Every crossing was a risk. Nevertheless, they arrived. Between 30,000 and 40,000 former slaves are thought to have arrived in Canada. Places like Windsor, St. Catharines, Buxton, and Toronto saw the formation of entire towns. There were businesses, churches, and schools. Black Canadians started establishing anti-slavery organizations, printing newspapers, and fighting for civil rights, not only for themselves, but also for those who were still held in slavery in the South. Using St. Catharines as a base for her return voyages into the United States to rescue others, Harriet Tubman herself spent a number of years living there. Canada wasn't the end for her or many others. It was just the start. It wasn't a paradise, though. Economic hardship and racism persisted. Black settlers were frequently assigned the hardest, lowest-paying work and kept apart. They weren't property, though. No one hunted them. And that distinction was crucial. So picture the scene. Your feet come into contact with unfamiliar ground. Your heart continues to race. You look over your shoulder, beyond the river, in the past, then forth. No one owns you for the first time in your life. You're at liberty. The stars are still in the sky. Not only did the Underground Railroad alter lives, it rocked a slave-holding society to its core. That society retaliated. Every successful escape meant more than just lost property to slave owners in the South. Their electrical wall had a fracture in it. One harsh fact served as the foundation for their wealth, rules, and way of life. Humans were viewed as objects, and one step at a time, the Underground Railroad broke that illusion. So they retaliated in terror. It was typical to see posters with incentives for fugitives. For a man, woman, or child who is returned alive or dead, $100, $500, or even $1,000 can be given. With dogs, firearms, and falsified documentation, slave catchers, some authorized by law, others only bounty hunters, prowled the northern states. Under false pretenses, free black Americans were frequently abducted from the streets and sold back into slavery. The most severe version of the Fugitive Slave Act, passed by Congress in 1850, made escape even more difficult. It compelled people and officials in the North to assist in recaptures. Judges who ruled in favor of slaveholders received more compensation. Additionally, anyone who helped someone escape, even by providing food or shelter, could be fined or imprisoned. Even free states were made into hunting grounds by the law. Slave catchers and anti-slavery activists engaged in combat in cities like Boston and Philadelphia. To save apprehended fugitives before they could be taken south, mobs have occasionally broken into courthouses. In contrast, the Underground Railroad was portrayed as a criminal enterprise in the South. Northern abolitionists were charged by pro-slavery publications with property theft and instigating rebellion. Fear was stoked by rumors of rebellion, which were occasionally used as an excuse for violent suppression of enslaved populations. Nevertheless, the railroad continued, because its operators' tenacity was only strengthened by the backlash's severity. They constructed tighter networks, erected artificial walls, and excavated tunnels. To escape the expanding reach of federal authority, some relocated into Canada, further north. The railroad was not stopped by the opposition. It demonstrated how strong it had grown. Outrage erupted with each capture. Every escape offered hope, and each conflict over runaway slaves brought the country closer to collapse. Eventually, a civil war would break out. However, there were rumors, carts, and the silent rebellion of common people doing what the law prohibited and what their conscience required before the troops marched and the battle colors flew. The Civil War broke out. Alongside it came the Emancipation Proclamation, the Confederacy's demise, and the official abolition of slavery in the US. However, independence was already being claimed covertly long before Lincoln signed any papers, and even before armies fought at Antietam or Gettysburg, by torchlight, by footsteps, by runners, and by those who extended their hands to assist others in following. The Underground Railroad was never a government initiative, a structure, or a memorial. At the time, it left behind no records, official awards, or statues. The dirt, the stars, and the memories of those who walked it all bear the imprint of its heritage. Stories were its lifeblood, spoken, passed along, occasionally accepted, occasionally rejected. Nevertheless, it continued. Today, museums, memorials, and restored residences honor the routes taken by fugitives. Sites such as the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati or the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Visitor Center in Maryland serve as silent reminders of those who gave their all for freedom. However, its actual legacy transcends all places. It is based on the notion that common people managed to rebel against heinous injustice. Without troops, without legislation, without authority, with songs and quilts, lamps in windows, unlocked doors, and unspoken trust, they resisted. They created networks in the absence of blueprints. They offered assistance to strangers without expecting payment. And they repeatedly responded to the query, "No, what am I supposed to do, but what do I have to do?" That is the most profound lesson of the Underground Railroad. Not only is freedom valuable, but it's also achievable, and bravery doesn't always shout. Sometimes, after midnight, it just stands in a field and waits, its hand extended. Every act of conscience that resists cruelty bears the echoes of the railroad. In every attempt to proclaim the truth, provide safe passage while the world is on fire, and defend the weak. Because injustice is no longer always accompanied by chains. However, it continues to walk. We also need to. There is still someone whispering, and the stars are still above somewhere. You're practically free in this manner. There are no golden thrones or lightning bolts to bring Inuit legend to life. Slowly, like breath on frost, it comes out. It inhabits the snow, the quiet, and the places where meaning is profound, yet there are few words. No paper was used to write these tales. They were etched in memory, molded by the wind, and passed down through the centuries by firelight and voice. The Arctic has been home to Inuit people for thousands of years. A world of long, continuous nights, undulating ice, and expansive white landscapes. Survival in this frozen environment requires a profound regard for the natural world. Their mythology does the same. Their tales are more than just amusement. They are instructive. How to live, how to hunt, how to respect the harmony among spirits, animals, and people. It is difficult to distinguish between the natural and the supernatural. The wind has the ability to whisper. The sea is able to breathe. Your ideas are audible to the animals. Inuit stories are more personal than many mythology that divide gods from humans. Among the people are the spirits. They observe, they provide direction. They can be punishing at times. They're not far away. They are intimate. In fur-wrapped snow homes with the wind howling outside, elders would narrate these stories in quiet tones. Children listened in order to comprehend the country as well as to absorb the stories. A raven myth was more than just a bird story. It imparted cunning. It wasn't just a scary tale about a seal spirit. It served as a reminder to hunters to express gratitude for the animal's life. In the Arctic, time moved differently. Storytelling did the same. No timepieces, don't hurry. A tale could span a season or a night. Like drifting snow, each recounting would change slightly depending on the teller, the audience, and the occasion. There is no one book or pantheon that contains all of Inuit mythology. It is a collection of beliefs that have been influenced by various Inuit communities in Greenland, Canada, and Alaska. However, the themes recur: change, living, animal spirits, the sea's might. and Sedna's enigmatic presence, the goddess of the sea, all marine life's mother. These are not merely folk tales, they are echoes in the ice that are alive, still being blown by the wind, still murmuring in the shadows. Sedna is a country of drifting bones and icy solitude beneath the Arctic Ocean's freezing waves. In the traditional sense, she is not a deity, she is not a king or queen, no crown is worn by her. Her fingers are gone due to treachery, and her long, dark hair is entangled in the currents. The strongest spirit in Inuit mythology is called Sedna, mother of all marine life. It is said that she is the source of fish, walruses, seals, and whales. She controls the abundance of the ocean. Additionally, the hunt is unsuccessful if she is upset. The sea becomes silent. People are left without food. As is the case with many oral traditions, her story varies from place to place. However, the bones don't change. She was a young woman once, the daughter of a creator god, according to some, a girl of no remarkable birth, according to others. According to several versions, she turned down suitors or was duped into marrying a dog or bird that was dressed as a man. Her father takes her away by boat in an attempt to save her or absolve himself of shame. The storm, however, rises. Her father pushes Sedna overboard out of fear or desperation as the sea roars around them. Screaming for assistance, she clings to the boat's side, but one by one he chops off her fingers. Each piece that is torn turns into a different animal as it falls into the water, such as a seal, fish, or whale. Sedna goes down. She doesn't pass away. She transforms. Her hair is usually knotted and her spirit is constantly on guard as she lives in a murky realm beneath the sea. When hunters are greedy or ungrateful, she withholds the animals. She needs to be placated. A shaman is sent into trance, wandering beneath the sea, combing her hair, calming her rage, pleading for forgiveness. Sedna is pain. Power is Sedna. She is the remembrance of betrayal and the keeper of balance. She is why hunters must offer thanks. Why is every component of the animal used? Why the kill is followed by silence? She is the sorrow and the kindness of the ocean. And even now, under the ice, Sedna waits, listening. In the Inuit world, animals are not just animals. They are teachers, watchers, and spirits with fins and fangs and feathers and fur. Living in the Arctic means coexisting with strong, perceptive, and clever creatures. You do not vanquish them, you speak to them, and sometimes they speak back. Inuit mythology is replete with legends about animals that walk between worlds, spiritually as well as physically. Some change, showing up as animals that shed their skins, or humans in animal shape, to walk among people as men or women. These shapeshifters are dangerous as well as wise. The raven is one of the most enduring figures, cunning, unpredictable, and a trickster. In some tales, he brings light to the world by stealing the sun. In others, he reorganizes the terrain for entertainment purposes or engages in games with people. Raven is never completely secure, yet he is not malevolent. He serves as a reminder that things in nature don't always go as planned. The polar bear, Nanook, is not merely a great hunter. He alternates between being a man in a bear's body and a guardian spirit. Killing someone is a sacred commitment. The bear must be revered, its bones returned to the land, its soul thanked, or else the spirits may turn cold and mute. The spirits that protect the animals themselves are another. There is an Inua, a type of soul, in every animal, including seals, foxes, and caribou. The Inua may retaliate angrily if the animal is abused or handled disrespectfully. According to several Inuit legends, animals that have forgotten appreciation return as humans to test or punish them. The calm truth is always present beneath the surface. Nature is not dominated by humans. They are transitory visitors, and the animals, visible or unseen, are older than memory. Children are thus trained. at a young age. Don't make fun of the raven. Don't waste your hunting efforts. Avoid stepping on the shadow of a sleeping seal. The ghosts are constantly observing, not from above, but from the snow, the trees, and the unswiping eyes behind them. Some people are able to transition between the visible and invisible in the vast Arctic, where the land appears to go on forever and the sky feels near enough to touch. They are neither prophets nor priests. They are a wilder, older entity. They are the Inuit shamans known as the Angakuk. The Angakuk is not picked at random. Some people are born with visions, odd dreams, signs, or the ability to survive unthinkable accidents. Others have received training. However, everyone must tread the fine line between earth and spirit, sanity and quiet, and life and death. They serve as both a messenger and a healer. The Angakuk is called upon when a person is ill, and neither a plant nor a bone can help. The Angakuk are the ones who travel not on foot, but by soul when the seals disappear from the ice or when the storms never stop. They enter other realms, worlds concealed beneath the sea, inside the sky, and behind the land itself, through drum and trance, chanting and breathing. It is a journey rather than a vision. The Angakuk encounters entities in these spirit realms that are inappropriate for the average individual to encounter. The souls of animals that were not given credit, the ghosts of the enraged dead, and powerful entities like the sea goddess Sedna. The only person who can enter her underwater world, comb her tangled hair, calm her rage, and restore equilibrium to the human world is the Angakuk. However, the cost is high. The Angakuk are respected but not necessarily trusted, and they frequently live separately. They have peculiar dreams. They see too much. They also bear hardships that others are unable to. They are able to predict which child will become unwell before the symptoms show up. When the wind is calm, they hear voices. They're not deities. They are fallible. It is also said that some people become corrupted, either failing to return from the spirit journey or exploiting their abilities for selfish ends. People are afraid of these fallen shamans. They hardly ever speak their names. The Angakuk is still called upon in times of need. They sit by the fire, shut their eyes, and disappear into the darkness, across the ice, and into the unseen's heart. Not everybody thinks that spirits exist. However, everyone pays attention when the food disappears, the child refuses to wake, and the sea turns black. The elders advise speaking quietly on Arctic nights when the snow is still and the dogs are not barking. It's because the dead are listening, not because of wolves or wind. There is no clear distinction between life and death in Inuit mythology. The deceased are still alive. Sometimes they linger as presence, sometimes as recollection, and occasionally as something colder. It is not uncommon to encounter restless spirits, also referred to as twangait or angiak in certain traditions. They may be lost, irate, or hungry, and they come back when the living breach old taboos. What taboos are they? Numerous. Old laws were passed down, never fully explained, but always obeyed. The northern lights should never be whistled at. Some animals should never be cooked in the same pot. Never mention a recently deceased person's name too soon. These actions could call spirits back before they're ready or have left. One must show respect for the deceased. Burials were handled carefully. The body was left with personal belongings, amulets, knives and tools. In order to prevent the spirit from feeling deceived or empty-handed in the next world, not out of sentimentality. In order to protect the body and serve as a reminder to the living, graves were frequently constructed with large piles of stones. Below is something sacred. Even so, ghosts occasionally roam. Some people come back because they love you. A hunter to lead his family, a mother to protect her child. Others, however, return because they are in agony, feel betrayed, or just can't sleep. The tent wall might flicker with their shadows. Their voices could reverberate in the ice creek. A chronic cold that no heat can cure, a run of bad luck, or an unexplained disease. Any of these could indicate the presence of a spirit. The Anga cook is consulted when this occurs. They may communicate with the deceased, provide closure, or even lead the ghost to rest through chanting and sacrifices. But sometimes the only thing that can keep you safe is quiet. People continue to exercise caution as a result. They don't make jokes about dying. They don't talk sloppily at night. Because the past never sleeps in the Arctic. It moves. It also remembers. The heavens start to move on some evenings in the Arctic, when the sky is clear and everything is quiet. The blackness is rippled with curtains of light, violet, green, and occasionally crimson. Like flames they flicker, like wind they swirl. The aurora borealis are these. Furthermore, they are more than just gorgeous in Inuit mythology. They're still alive. The northern lights are not considered a meteorological occurrence by the Inuit. Spirits are what they are. Some claim that they are the spirits of the deceased, dancing, celebrating, and sometimes even watching as they play across the sky. Others claim that these are the ancient hunters' torches, illuminating the night sky while they hunted prey. However, they are never pointless. The lights are thought to represent the spirits of children who passed away too young in some Inuit communities, giggling and engaging in a sort of cosmic game with a walrus skull. In others, the lights symbolize the ancestors themselves, congregated in the heavens to serve as a reminder of their existence to the living, in action, not in words. It is also claimed that the lights are warning signs. When they flash and whirl rapidly, it could be an indication that something has gone wrong in the human realm and that spirits are restless or unhappy. A taboo broken, an offering forgotten, a ritual abandoned. What we forget is remembered by the sky. The aurora must therefore be treated with the utmost reverence. It is forbidden for kids to whistle at the lights. It could be too close to the spirits. Whistling is said to cause lights to descend and cut off your head. According to others, it allows the deceased to re-enter the world of the living. Although they were not afraid of the lights, the Inuit did not ignore them. They were reverently observed. They were warnings, messages, indications, or occasionally just presents. And the old myths still come alive as lights appear above a peaceful village. People go outside to observe. As they feel something ancient move over them, they fall silent. No voice can explain it. It cannot be replaced by science, because there are instances when the question of what dances in the sky cannot be answered. It serves as a reminder that we are never truly alone in space. At first there was silence and ice. The ground was snow-covered, level, and unmarked by animal or human footprints. Life, however, was waiting even in that nothingness. Inuit creation myths don't start with gods carving mountains or flames emerging from the sky. They start with the vast and enigmatic nature itself. It took time to create the world. Slowly, shape by shape, breath by breath, soul by spirit, it came into being. According to one account, Raven, also known as Tulugak, was a strong and cunning ghost who used to reside in the dark because there was no sun, moon, or stars. There was always a shadow over the planet. Raven was sick of tripping in the dark. Therefore he stole light from a self-centered person who had locked it away using cunning, knowledge, or both. He threw it into the air, shattering it into fragments. The moon, stars, and sun. The Arctic's lengthy summer days and eerie winter nights are a result of Raven's gift. In other tales, giants, beings of great strength and isolation, were said to have once roamed the earth. These enormous beings flooded the oceans with their tears, sculpted rivers with their footprints, and formed mountains with their hands. They eventually vanished, but their breath turned into the wind and their bones into the ground. Stories of two brothers, spirits, who quarreled about how to create the world are also told. Sleek, swift, and untamed caribou were created by one sibling. The other, however, claimed that hunting them would be too difficult. In order to create a balance, he made them weaker. Listeners are reminded that the world is not flawless by these tales. It is negotiated. Everything has a price. According to Inuit religion, creation is a continuous process. It's still going on. The shaping is carried on by every hunt, every storm, and every birth and death. The earth is not done, the sea changes, and the land listens. Furthermore, humans are visitors, not masters. Living in the Arctic means being a part of a planet that is still developing and evolving. This place is not yours. However, you may comprehend it if you remain silent. Only a bit. There is more to Inuit myths than just amusement. They serve as survival manuals. Every story has a lesson, a warning, or a truth woven throughout. Truths molded by quiet hunger and frost, not the kind found in books or handed down by kings. Tales that teach you how to stay alive as well as how to live. These are stories of morality. Consider the tale of the Kalupiluit, a creature that inhabits the icy Arctic waters underneath the ice. It listens and waits in silence under crevices and breathing holes. It has lengthy fingers, eyes that are too big, and a parka. Additionally, the Kalupiluit reaches up, drags a youngster beneath, and holds them for eternity if they stray too near the coast. This is a lesson, not only a ghost story. Don't go it alone. Stay away from thin ice. Where your parents are unable to observe, the Kalupiluit does. Or think of the story of the Mahaha, a slender, frosty demon that grins and giggles while stalking in the cold. It doesn't use clubs or claws to kill. It's a tickle. It uses its lengthy fingers to tease its prey until their respiration stops or they freeze. Crazy? Perhaps. However, it instills caution. Never assume that the Arctic's quiet is safe. Some threats appear with a smile. Then there are tales of animals being dishonored, hunters who ignore customs, squander meat, or make fun of their prey. The animals reappear in these stories as spirits, sometimes during storms and other times during dreams. They either exact revenge or just disappear, leaving the populace to starve. It's an easy lesson. Live with dignity. Being grateful is a necessity. Even the harsh and eerie story of Sedna teaches us about the consequences of betrayal, imbalance, and the high price of fear and greed. Her suffering turns into the hunger of the ocean. Hunts end in failure because of her rage. Sedna is not offended by you. You remember to give back. Written laws and commandments are not fundamental to Inuit morality. It is knowledge that has been lived, molded by adversity, and transmitted via song and whisper. Outsiders find the story odd, dark, chilly, frequently harsh. However, they are accurate, efficient. Recall, they continue to reverberate in a child's thin iced terror, in the silent prayer of a hunter prior to the kill, in the quiet that comes after every tale, where the message stays and awaits comprehension. The world has evolved. Dog sleds have been replaced with snowmobiles. Where stars previously danced in the sky, satellites now do the same. Textbooks now explain even the northern lights, particles from the sun, storms caused by geomagnetics, ions in the atmosphere. The ancient tales still exist, though. Despite first being transmitted solely through whale oil lamps, Inuit mythology has withstood colonization, missionary pressure, and contemporary distractions. It has endured linguistic repression, forced relocations, and the agonizing legacy of residential schools. The myths continue to hum beneath the surface. Sedna is now carved into soapstone by Inuit artists. grandparents in Nunavut continue to tell their children about the Kalapiluit. In their contemporary rhymes, Inuit rappers make allusions to old spirits. At community centers, storytellers introduce younger audiences to mythical creatures like the shape-shifting polar bear, raven, and mahaha. It's not a relic, they are instruments, cultural recollection. Identity was pieced up from survival and shadow. These tales help to root the Inuit people in a world where screens are brighter than firelight and traditional hunting routes are threatened by climate change. They serve as a reminder to them and everybody else listening that nature and humans are intertwined, that there are laws in the land, that ghosts still accompany us in silence. The challenge of conserving not only the myths, but also the language and rhythm of storytelling itself has been taken on by contemporary Inuit elders, researchers, and leaders. Because when the stories are translated into the chilly forms of colonial tongues, their power is diminished. Inuktitut's syllables have connotations that English does not. However, the stories still have life in translation. They talk about resiliency, loss, and the harsh beauty of surviving. The Inuit know better, despite the world's attempts to classify them as superstition, folklore, or bedtime stories. These are more than just tales. They serve as blueprints of their identities, of their previous locations, of the things they are carrying. Therefore, take a moment to stop if you ever find yourself in the Arctic, away from the lights and sounds of the South. Give the wind a break. Hear the moan of the ice. The snow moves, the heavens move. In that silence, you might hear a narrative. Old, incomplete, breathing still. Similar to the individuals who recounted it.